And Anand Narasimhan, and I'm coming to you live from Moscow. And we are here at the Svetskaya Square, and right behind us is the beautiful Kremlin. And behind there, you can't catch it, that's the clock tower inside the Kremlin. This is all the entire Russian seat of government, the Russian Federation, ladies and gentlemen. Some amazing visuals, pictures around here. And it's been a great day for the dosti between Bharat and Russia, and perhaps the personal connect the two leaders, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Vladimir Putin, share with each other. And somewhere that has been underlined, despite comments coming in from the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky about the garam joshi, if I may use a Hindi word, or the warmth with which the two have met, and he has taken exception to the embrace. But somewhere Bharat has underlined, our friendships are our friendships. You don't judge us based on our friendships. We are friends with everybody. If you're shaking hands and embracing President Joe Biden or President Macron or other world leaders, we're going to do this to our age-old friend. This is the 17th time that the two of them have met each other over the last 10 years. And there is a reason why this friendship is only growing stronger and perhaps more healthier for the two nations. Both nations have concerns, they have been addressed, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi was very candid in that bilateral conversation with President Putin, saying that all the concerns were on the table, nothing was off the table, everything was spoken about. And he also commended President Vladimir Putin for being very frank, honest, and very, very open about his thoughts and what needed to be done. In fact, he also said that your openness to finding peace and a resolution to the Ukraine conflict has given me hope, and that's what he told the world. While he also took up the issue or the overall aspect of terror. So be it terror, be it war, he said, let's end war, let's fight terror. That was a strong message that came from Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And he said, I'm glad that President Putin is also inclined in the same direction. Is there a greater role that Bharat is going to play trying to mediate between these two nations, and of course, perhaps the West and Russia? We have to wait and watch, because Bharat has said anything for peace. Shanti की बहाली के लिए भारत कुछ भी करने को तैयार है. That is what भारत हमेशा तत्पर है, तैयार है, is what Prime Minister Narendra Modi said in front of President Putin. And President Putin said, I value the fact that you are wanting peace and I value your inputs. That's what they said. Also, in terms of cooperation, we are expecting more cooperation at the economic level. A target, as Foreign Secretary Cavalcade just finished his briefing, and he said the target has been reset to $100 billion of trade between the two nations by 2030, and Bharat wants to contribute more than the $4 billion. Currently, $60 billion per se is coming in only via import of crude. So they want to extend the dynamics and the dimensions to it. And Bharat has said and asked Russia to open up more segments for investments from Bharat into Russia, and of course open up the markets a little more. So what is going to be done, we'll have to wait and watch. Many layers and many dynamics. But first up, the hot button issue, which everybody openly accepted, both leaders accepting that Ukraine was on the table, the conflict was on the table, and it was discussed. Before we go across to our guests, let's just quickly play out what Prime Minister Narendra Modi had to say on the Ukraine aspect.
यूक्रेन के विषय में हम दोनों अपने अपने विचार खुले मन से, विस्तार से हम उसकी चर्चा कर पाए. युद्ध हो, संघर्ष हो, आतंकवादी हमले हो, मानवता में विश्वास करने वाला हर व्यक्ति जब जानहानि होती है तब बहुत पीड़ित होता है. लेकिन उसमें भी जब मासूम बच्चों की कत्ल होती है, मासूम बच्चों को मरते हुए देखते हैं, तब हृदय छलनी हो जाता है. एक मित्र के नाते मैंने हमेशा कहा है कि हमारी भावी पीढ़ी के उज्जवल भविष्य के लिए शांति सर्वाधिक आवश्यक है. लेकिन मैं ये भी जानता हूं कि युद्ध के मैदान में समाधान संभव नहीं होते. बम, बंदूक और गोलियों के बीच समाधान और शांति वार्ताएं सफल नहीं होती हैं, और हमने वार्ता के माध्यम से ही शांति के रास्ते अपनाने होंगे.
So he's raised the issue of the children's hospital being bombed, and that's not something that nothing was off the table. The two leaders met as friends, and friends discussed things threadbare. Before we go across to our guests, I just want to pan to our left. I'm going to ask our VJ Arpit Seth, who's done a fantastic job. Just pan to our left because we've got the ringside view of the Prime Minister's cavalcade getting ready for him to depart for the airport, ladies and gentlemen. So any moment now, he actually was going to take some time for a photo op with the entire embassy officials and of the Russian embassy, and also with some of the volunteers who have stepped up to put together the entire community engagement. There you go. The cavalcade is coming out. The roads have been blocked. The front motor cavalcade, the front car. There you go. The pilot has gone ahead, and there you go. That's the security cavalcade. You will see a beast. You will see a big beamer with the Indian flag on. That will have the Prime Minister. That's the one. There you want that. The one that's just turning around the corner. No, sorry. Just after that, that's the lead car, and thereafter comes the big security vehicle. And soon behind that, you will have the Indian flag flying. It's the President's special vehicle that's been now accorded to Prime Minister Narendra Modi. There you go. That's the car. That's the car. There you go. With the flag. That's the beast. That's the Rolls Royce that's been adapted, modified, bulletproof vehicle with the Indian flag fluttering. That is the one that has Prime Minister Narendra Modi in it, and they are making their way to the airport. Ambassador Vinay Kumar, Foreign Secretary Kavatra, External Affairs Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar, they're all part of this motorcade that's making its way to see off Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And they are also embarking en route to Vienna, where the conversation shifts to the bilaterals and the engagements with Austria. And that will happen through Wednesday, as the Prime Minister will have a short tour, and then he heads back on Wednesday itself back to Bharat. So let's bring the focus back onto Moscow and to the issues that have been discussed between these two very strong dost, mitra, who have said it's mutual respect and trust. That's the bedrock of this equation. Ambassador Pinakaranjan Chakravarti, former Secretary MEA, is with us. We have Ben Harris, Editor-in-Chief, BNE, and former Moscow Bureau Chief of the Daily Telegraph, and Dr. Marxus Gassoons, founder Sanskrit Zealot Society. He is actually working on the translation of the Ramayana from Sanskrit into Russian. He is with us, and Swasti Rao, Associate Fellow, ITSA, is also with us. Ambassador Pinakaranjan Chakravarti, would like to start with you. As I say, namaste to all our guests. Thank you very, very much. Moscow is beautiful. It's fantastic, sir. The environment and perhaps the atmosphere in which this entire conversation has happened. The two leaders meeting face to face at a bilateral, first time since December 2021. There was a lot of warmth before and after the engagement between the two individuals, but both of them very candid that nothing was off the table. Everything was discussed threadbare. Is this encouraging? How should India react to the West's reaction to President Zelensky, to others who are saying, how can you embrace someone like Putin? That embrace has broken my heart, etc. Should India look beyond that? Should we treat our friends as friends, and while working towards perhaps global solidarity and peace?
Well, first, let me second what you just said about Moscow being a beautiful city. Yes, it is indeed, and I think the weather would also be very nice now. No, I don't think what the world is saying or commenting on this visit matters to us. That we will be listening to them. We have our own policy. We have our own interests. Russia is a long-standing friend, time-tested friend, and we can also make allegations and accusations against other countries going back, saying that they also played a role in bringing about this situation, which they now don't want to acknowledge. And I don't want to go into the history. But you see, Russia is not the only country which suddenly thought that let us have a war. There were reasons behind it. And I think that those reasons need to be publicized and told, and the world should know. I mean, it is not the prerogative of the West to decide that we shall unleash war on Russia and rub its nose on the ground, etc. These are, I think, sometimes I feel that these objectives that they have been talking about sound a little naive to me, because Russia is not a country that is going to just go down and go and roll over. And Ukraine, unfortunately, my sympathies are with Ukraine because they have become the scapegoat. जैसे हम हिंदी में कहते हैं ना, बलि के बकरे उनको बना दिए हैं और वो बेचारे पिस गए इसमें. thanks to the interests that the West has pursued. I think India has taken, very simply said that, look, if you stop the war, go to the discussion table and solve it by diplomacy. And I think that is the most logical thing to do, because if the West thinks that they will defeat Russia, I think they have miscalculated that thing. But if they think that they will keep this up and somehow get Russia to sort of on its knees, I don't think that's going to happen, because Russia is not a country that is just going to fold over and roll back, etc. So I think that is why India has decided that this is going to be the only route left now is to have a ceasefire and go for a dialogue, because that is the only way a solution can be found.
You know, Belarus, as Ambassador Pinakaranjan Chakravarti was saying, that I was talking to a lot of Russian journalists, foreign journalists here. So one perspective was Russia is the one that's expansionist. President Putin is expansionist. From the Russian point of view, they said, we just said leave Ukraine alone. Leave this area. Don't bring NATO in here. Let not America and NATO get involved in Ukraine. And we don't want Western missiles and US missiles training their guns right at our borders, because Ukraine is all flat land. And had they not done that, had they not persisted on with that, this wouldn't have happened. And we kept telling Zelensky, and he didn't understand. There was a deliberate orchestration of change in regime against the will of the people. Now that's the Russian, position. Who's right and who's wrong here, Ben?
It's very complicated, isn't it? But then I think if you step back, that Ukraine has been led up the garden path to some extent by the West. Before Maidan, before the 2014 revolution, Ukraine had enshrined in the constitution a position of neutrality. And if you look at its geopolitical situation, caught between Russia and the EU, and Russia has been constantly trying to become friends with the EU. It wanted to do trade deals. Putin asked Barroso to become a member, although he was told it was too big. But that left Ukraine in a very awkward position. And then everything went crazy after the 2014 revolution, and they abandoned the neutrality and they became pro-West. They became aspired to join NATO, which makes sense, because if you're not on good terms with Russia, like the Baltic states, which have been annexed during the Soviet Union, then NATO is the obvious place to go. But given its proximity to Russia, and given that Putin has been saying for a decade and a half, you've been expanding NATO, but enough's enough, we draw the line at Ukraine, then that message didn't go down. And they came December of 2021, the Russians made it very clear, like, we need a legal guarantee that Ukraine will not join NATO, that we cannot tolerate missiles on our doorstep in the way that the Americans wouldn't tolerate missiles in Cuba. And John F. Kennedy said that would be an act of war if those missiles arrived. It's the same scenario. And yet the West has ignored it. However, Ukraine's gone along with it on the understanding that it would be allowed into NATO, that the West would protect it. And push come to shove, that's not happened. I mean, NATO summit is starting today. Last year, Zelensky was insisting, give us a plan, give us a roadmap, give us concrete dates. And this year, he's been told, don't even bring that up. It's not going to happen. And it's left poor Ukraine in limbo. And Putin took this drastic measure to make his point by invading, to force the argument. However, now we're in this terrible situation with this awful attack on the children's hospital yesterday. And it seems like the West is committed to a permanent war with Russia.
Can any of these entities afford that, Dr. Marxist Kasum? Because, for a long time, many said Ukraine is just an extension of Russia, because Ukraine, correct me if I'm wrong, actually means the borderlands or the border area. And there was not long ago a hotel named Ukraine right in the heart of Moscow.
It is actually, the word Ukraine is sometimes used in a plural, which means the border lines, not actually even a border line, but the border lines of Russia. So if you want to understand India, you have to study Itihasa. You have to study Ramayana and Mahabharata.
Yes.
That's why we are working on a 10-year project of translating the Ramayana. You cannot understand India without knowing its history, and you cannot understand why the war started if you don't actually study the history of Russia. So it's the same story. So actually, when someone from a very far away country comes near the borders of Russia, why should they treat them friendly? Means like they are not those who started, but they are. So there are the big countries and the small countries. And India is a big country, and China is a big country, and Russia is a big country, and US is a big country, and they are the big players. So, and when the big players start to play through the smaller countries, it's like in the heat of Dacha. It's like, I mean, nothing new happens in this world. Everything we see has happened at some time in the history. So that's why, I mean, I love Mahabharata, because every story told is already there.
Yes.
If you study it, you know where it goes. You cannot fight everyone dead. I mean, someone has to inhabit this planet, and the planet is wide. I mean, it's wide and not that wide as well. So, I mean, we have to live in peace, but sometimes you have to fight for peace.
Very aptly put, and we cannot forget our itihasa. We can only learn from it, and we should always remember from it. But Swasti Raoji, if I may ask you, has Prime Minister Narendra Modi not just answered his detractors, but has he also been able to walk that tightrope where you don't succumb to the pressure of the West and you don't tow their narrative, and you don't fall over your feet to try and make good with your friend. You also tell your friend do what is right. While you tell those, your new friends, you tell your old friend, do what is right. You tell your new friends, you are not going to tell me what I should do. But I'm on the side of humanity. I'm on the side of peace. Has he been able to do that convincingly?
Yes, Anand. I think we need to sort of reset the tone and tenor of the discussion here. The one thing is that, we are discussing here the behavior of states, and the behavior of states is guided by national interest for sure. So all this imagery, of course, India and Russia have had historical ties, and they continue to have meaningful bilateral dialogue, and which is very evident from the Prime Minister's visit. But end of the day, you have to also understand that what has taken Prime Minister to Russia is basically safeguarding Indian national interest, and we have genuine national interest lying with Russia. So I think we need to sort of reset it a little bit. And the friend analogy doesn't go very far, because anybody can pick up whatever sides of history they want to pick up and then argue on a completely different line. So I would perhaps say that it's better to be a more technical argument of where India's national interests are. And I completely agree with you saying that India does not need to India does not owe an explanation to either Washington or Brussels, or for that matter, even Moscow. I mean, today, look at the beauty with which, the subtlety with which, Indian Prime Minister actually went ahead with, stating his condolences about that attack. And he always had the reason, he always had the choice to not do it, but then still he did it. So I think India's commitment lies with international interest, and one has to look at India's diplomatic behavior, international behavior with that lens. That's the first thing. The second and a more important thing when it comes to Russia, I think what happens is that a lot of times the discussions focus too much on where the relationship was. I think we really need to understand that if we find ourselves in this current geopolitical churning, we need to be talking about enabling frameworks for where the relationship is going in the future, right? So what are going to be the futuristic domains of India-Russia relationship? And there you cannot take away from the fact that the Ukraine war has been a big determinant. For example, today, the major part of Prime Minister's, discussions out there is all about energy, is about, Russia emerging as a major energy supplier. And one of the things that, we have not really been paying so much attention to is the fact that there was some discussion on, how we are trying to put together the Northern Sea route, for example, and we probably will be discussing about delivering Russian energy resources via those ports, by the NSR. And these kind of things are going to transform the relationship in a way which is a win-win situation for both, because it would be very naive to say that the geopolitical realities will not impact the bilateral relations of India. I think things are fluid, and it makes a lot of sense to go with the flow and then keep national interest first. So yes, I'm absolutely with that.
Yes, and And at some point, I think all nations have got to learn to compartmentalize. They can join issues on certain facts to a certain level, but beyond that, they've got to protect the interests and respect the interests, because everybody will look at it from their own perspective, and somewhere these perspectives have to align themselves. Like Prime Minister's message was very pertinent. End the war, but fight terror. And this is at a time when Russia is seeing incidents in Dagestan. It's happened somewhere around in Moscow, in other parts of Russia. And we have lost 5 soldiers to Kathua and that entire charge in Doda. And there is an encounter that's even now going on in Kathua. So Prime Minister unequivocal in his position as far as terror is concerned, and he's been calling for a global resolution and a statement on terrorism where nations will not back this as a tool or as an instrument of state policy. Let's listen to what he had to say, and we'll take this conversation forward.
पिछले 40-50 साल से भारत आतंकवाद को झेल रहा है। आतंकवाद कितना भयानक होता है, कितना घिनौना होता है, तो हम 40 साल से भुगत रहे थे। ऐसे में जब मॉस्को में आतंकवादी घटनाएं घटी, दागेस्तान में आतंकवाद की घटनाएं घटी, उसका दर्द कितना गहरा होगा इसकी मैं कल्पना करता हूं, और मैं हर प्रकार के आतंकवाद की घोर निंदा करता हूं।
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Prime Minister Narendra Modi clearly condemning any kind of act of terror. Now here, Ambassador Pinakaranjan Chakravarti, good terror and bad terror. Look at Five Eyes. Look at what's being done, where terrorists are being mourned in the Canadian House of Commons. And on the other hand, there are those who are trying to sermonize and saying, control whatever act is happening on your own soil. So how does this aspect, as far as terror is concerned, the fight against terror, can there be a larger story? Can there be a larger narrative? And perhaps somewhere that makes for a case for Bharat at the permanent seat in the UN?
Well, it sounds logical that all countries should get together to fight terrorism. But then terrorism also becomes a tool of state policy sometimes. And we, of course, have a living example next to us in Pakistan. And that is the terror that we have suffered for so many years. That's a long history. But then India has indicated and very clearly taken a stand that terror and talks cannot go together. So we have to stop terror if we want to have talks, and we have to stop terror if we want peace, because that is the way to go. But then nations, to further their own interests, have used terrorism as a tool, not just Pakistan, but other countries as well. And so this is something that the world must, if we cannot get together on an issue like terrorism, I don't see the world getting together on any other issue. And forget about, these big issues like the Ukraine war and Hamas, the Hamas-Israel war, etc. So if terrorism cannot bring us together, then I think we are transiting into a world where we are, of course, in a transition in terms of the world order. We are transiting into a world where we have to live with terror and we have to deal with terror. So I think that is the point that Prime Minister Modi was making. And this is a very valid point. But I think a young leader understands this all over the world. But they sometimes find it useful to use terrorists or terror for furthering their national interest.
But, how would Russia look at this? Because it's not that Russia has not backed terrorists or terror elements as an instrument of state policy. It also, continues to engage with nations like Iran, who are openly backing the Hamas and the Hezbollah.
Well, Iran, of course, we do not want Iran to further terrorism. We don't want any country to further terrorism. And I think the Middle East situation, Iran, Hamas, that's a different story altogether. But I think India and Russia are on the same page in terms of fighting terrorists who are attacking within the territories of our countries. But yes, there are countries, as I said, they will use terrorism and they will use terrorist proxies for their own interest. And Iran is a prime example. Why? Because it has such a approach toward Israel that it wants to wipe out Israel from the map, and these are some of the things that they have said. And they are using these proxies around Israel to hit Israel, etc. Hamas is one of them. Hezbollah is one of them. The Houthis are another terrorist group. So this is so the use of terrorism for national policy or for a particular ideological position. This is the problem that we are facing.
Ben Harris, friend's friend is my enemy, enemy's enemy is my friend. These equations tend to work. Can nations set these aside and take a position on terrorism, or do you believe there will always be this narrative of good terrorism and bad terrorism, and one's fight versus the others, branding it as terror?
I hope there's not always going to be good terrorism, bad terrorism. Russia's position on terrorism is, I think, fairly clear. You have to remember that when Putin came to office, that Russia had been attacked. There was a series of apartment bombs, killed hundreds of Russians in their sleep. And his promise to do something about that was one of the things that swept him into power in the first place in 2000, and then launched the war in Chechnya, the second one, separatist war. And unfortunately, that was fought very brutally, and the Kremlin got itself a bad reputation for being very heavy-handed, because its strategy was basically to flatten towns rather than do urban fighting. But Putin himself, I mean, again, you should also appreciate that Russia is a very large, multi-ethnic, multi-denominational country. It's not just white Russian Slavs. I mean, they're Buddhists, and there's a large Muslim population, 15% of the population. And terrorism has been a problem. When I was living in Moscow in the 90s, we had a series of bombs in apartments, in railways, in subway, in underpasses. And it was something that people feared. And Putin gave a speech at the UN, I think it was in 2019, where he called on the international community to unite and join together and fight terrorism like the same way we fought against Hitler, was his words. But unfortunately, Russia, this was after the annexation of Crimea, and he was just already being pariahed or sidelined, and the call was ignored. And Russia feels that it's on its own with this problem. The terrorism died away, but as you alluded to, the Crocus City attack in Moscow, 150 people were slaughtered in space of 10, 20 minutes by terrorists who reportedly from Tajikistan, but backed by God knows who. ISIS is the belief. And so it's reared up again. And then we had more recently Dagestan, where there was an attack, and it's still a problem. And Putin has been very accommodating to the Muslim population, who are part of the Russian people, but at the same time, Russia's taken a very hard line on terrorism. And I think it's one of the points where Russia could cooperate with the rest of the world, because the interests are the same. But as you say, it's not just like, terrorist problem in Pakistan, but the US have done deals with Al-Qaeda in Syria, or their proxies, as part of their fight to bring down Assad. And so they're guilty of it as well. And unfortunately, it does seem to be a very complicated and difficult issue where people are not just taking the black and white terrorism is bad stand, as I think they should.
Well, let's take the conversation forward. We've got two angles to cover, but limited time, so I'm just going to punch them together because it's all about economics. Two nations who want to drive economy, and Russia is facing sanctions. Bharat is on a trajectory where it wants to grow aggressively over the next 10 years. As the Prime Minister said in his third term, he wants to take Bharat to the third largest economy in the world. And for that to happen, both nations need to actively engage. One of the aspects the Prime Minister spoke about was securing the interests of the farmer or the kisan in this country, in our country. And that was through the supply of fertilizers. 48 lakh tons of fertilizer that was supplied by Russia, because Russia, Belarus and Ukraine were the three largest suppliers of fertilizer to Bharat. So because of the Ukraine conflict, Russia stepped up and helped. And Prime Minister has underlined, saying, given the Kharif and the Rabi seasons, we need more, and we need this commitment and this supply to be continued. And somewhere Russia said that we will try and ensure and do whatever can be done to help India in this case. The other aspect was the economic cooperation and, more importantly, fuel and energy. Let's listen to both and then take it forward with our guests.
भारत रूस मित्रता के कारण जब दुनिया फूड, फ्यूल एंड फर्टिलाइजर के संकट से गुजर रही थी, हमारी मित्रता और हमारे सहयोग के कारण मैं मेरे देश के किसानों को फर्टिलाइजर में मुसीबत में नहीं आने दिया। फर्टिलाइजर की उनकी जो आवश्यकता है उसकी पूरी करने में हम सफल रहे और उसमें हमारी मित्रता का भी बहुत बड़ा रोल है और किसानों के हितों की रक्षा के लिए हम कमिटेड हैं। आने वाले भी दिनों में किसानों के हितों के लिए हम चाहेंगे कि रशिया के साथ हमारा सहयोग और अधिक बढ़ता रहे। भारत में हम सामान्य नागरिक को पेट्रोल, डीजल की आवश्यकताओं में कठिनाइयों से हम बचा पाए। इतना ही नहीं, विश्व को ये बात स्वीकार करनी होगी कि भारत और रूस का फ्यूल के संबंध में जो एग्रीमेंट रहा, उसने दुनिया को भी एक प्रकार से मार्केट में स्टेबिलिटी देने का इनडायरेक्टली बहुत बड़ा काम किया है।
Dr. Marxes Gasfuns is with us, and we also have Swasti Rao. So let me just take it to Dr. Marxes and ask him. I know you are an academic. I know you are looking at Itihasa, but from the larger aspect, do you believe there is a natural affinity between the Russian people and Bharatiya or the Indian citizens, and that's why perhaps these issues together, these two nations can grow economically?
I believe that there is no nation closer to the Russians. I've been living in Russia for 20 years now. There is no nation closer to Russians than Indians. And although India is not one, I mean, it's the diversity of nations, and same as Russia, and still I believe there is no nation closer to Russia than the Indians. And just for example, for the fertilizers. So those forces who made the war, like in 2022, so the fertilizers, they were for $300 per item, and then it got up to $900. So it got 3 times up. So who got in trouble? So the poor countries got in trouble, not the European countries. They subsidized their farmers. So if Russia would want to get the world in trouble, it would not supply India with the fertilizers because the prices went up 3 times. So someone wanted the world to get in trouble because when they started adding sanctions to Russia, it had a long-lasting consequences. So someone wants a big fire that never turns off. And it's not Russia. I must say that the history of Russia shows that it's not Russia trying to fight the whole world. Russia is not an empire. Russia was never an empire, as was British Empire. They don't try to fuel out everything of the country. They get in, let's say, in domain. They put more in than they get out from it. So that's the difference between the Russian Empire and which was like 100 years ago, and the British Empire. So the British took everything they could from the India. When Russia came to Caucasus, to Dagestan, that was not the same. It was not the same when British came to India. So they put more money in than they ever got out from it because they wanted peace. Peace on their borders.
Very interesting analogy, and this is not the first person who's saying this, Swasti Rao, that there's a difference when the West tries to label President Putin as expansionist. It's quite rich, coming from nations that have destroyed other nations, and they'd have in the and I know it's writ large in history how they have been expansionist. And these are the nations today who are actually branding President Putin and Russia as expansionist. But when it comes to economic cooperation, are Russia and Bharat ideal partners with each other who can help each other grow and perhaps tide over these tough times and challenges ahead?
Yeah, so very quickly, I know we're running out of time, but the first thing about the expansionism, I think we should be, careful of that slippery ground, because then very easily with that logic, China can turn it around and sort of justify its expansionism on our borders, right? So I think expansionism, ancient cultures and civilizations having the clout versus respect for UN Charter and international law are two different things. And I think India has also made it very, very clear that it stands for respecting international law and UN Charter. So that was also part of your, Prime Minister's statement there. So I think we need to be a little careful when we are discussing, because jumping between epochs can sort of create that bit of a justification if somebody wants, right? That's one. The other thing about economic cooperation, yes, very correctly. Like I said, I've been maintaining from the beginning that what took Prime Minister Modi to Russia was a couple of things. Basically, it was guided by international interest. We've been having, I told you that there's been a transformation in the bilateral relationship from the largest weapon supplier. Russia is now one of the largest energy suppliers. In terms of weapons, of course, we did not hear anything new. I did not really see any update on the remaining deliveries of the S-400s, for example. So I presume that the delivery date is going to be the third quarter of 2026, as it was earlier. Coming back to economic ties, yes, two very important things, if you can notice carefully. We know that Russia is going to be an important energy supplier to India. And from India's perspective, then it has to be really, you have to do something very seriously to actually reduce the trade deficit. Because in the last 2 years, not only has the trade gone up in an unprecedented manner, but so has the trade deficit. And we need Russia to sort of get to invest back into India, and that is going to resolve the problem of the Indian rupees which are lying in the Russian Vostro accounts. And that is a technical matter. It is not really coming from lack of goodwill or something. It is purely coming from the structural constraints. And why I say this is very important, Anand, is because you see, we do not want to get into a situation, considering that the oil trade will go on and then LNG, etc., is going to be added to that. We don't want to be entering into a situation where we need to pay again in yuan, because when we pay in yuan, we basically only strengthen China's grip over de-dollarized trade. So it's that bit of that, delicate balancing that India needs to do there. That is why the rupee-ruble mechanism has to work, and for that to work, we need to also reduce the trade deficit. So that's one important part of the trade negotiations. The other thing about India and Russia signing a kind of an FTA, I think we did not really see any news on that. So I believe this is not really in the offing right now, but maybe in near future. But right now, like I said, and by the way, I must congratulate Prime Minister Modi for the way in which he actually got an assurance from Russia that they will be returning the Indian soldiers which were recruited by different Russian agencies, and who also died, because that was something that MEA had taken a very serious note of. And since Prime Minister has been able to get an assurance on that, I think that's a very, very good news for us. Yes.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Swasti Rao, Ambassador Pinakaranjan Chakravarti, Ben Harris, and also Dr. Marxist. Thank you so much for your inputs. We've got big news coming through. So before we take a break, ladies and gentlemen, we've got to share happy tidings. It was perhaps an open secret, but now it's been confirmed. Dacha has taken to platform X and said, "It is with immense pleasure that I welcome Mr. Gautam Gambhir as the new head coach of the Indian cricket team. Modern day cricket has evolved rapidly, and Gautam Gambhir has witnessed this changing landscape up close. Having endured the grind and excelled in various roles throughout his career, I am confident that Gautam Gambhir is the ideal person to steer Indian cricket forward. His clear vision for Team India, coupled with his vast experience, positions him perfectly to take on this exciting and most sought after coaching role. The BCCI fully supports him as he embarks on his new journey." Payal Mehta joins us. Payal, Gautam Gambhir has also acknowledged this and confirmed this, which was something like an open secret all this while.
Well, absolutely, Anand. This was in the offing, given the fact that the KKR team had also relieved him of his duties, with the team after having won the last tournament for the team as a coach as well. So that was something which was in the offing, but Gautam Gambhir has a rich experience backing him. He's played in every format of the game. He's been part of the 2007 T20 World Cup, has been part of the full World Cup, the 50-over World Cup also in 2011, and scored a very important knock in that final that India won versus Sri Lanka. So obviously, given his experience, given his exposure, that is something which, of course, Indian team was looking forward to, given the fact that now Rahul Dravid has decided to hang up his boots as a coach. So obviously, the next possible replacement was Gautam Gambhir. He was having negotiations with the BCCI for over a period of time. But, it's finally fruitified, and Gautam Gambhir again taking to X and saying that his only interest, like ever before, was to, in fact, wear a different hat but keep the country at the forefront.
Well, absolutely. Thank you for that input, Payal. It was confirmed. Anil Kumble also taking to Platform X and congratulating Gautam Gambhir, wishing him all the very, very best. Ladies and gentlemen, on that note, from Moscow, we're going to take a very, very short break. If there are pictures that are coming in of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, just before he got into the car towards the airport, he was there lined up on the, the entire Indian embassy here in Moscow, their family members, the volunteers would work together to put this entire event together, the community event, and also coordinating this entire visit, this whirlwind 26-hour visit that's gone, a lot of hard work that's gone behind the scenes. So the embassy officials, their families, they all stood waiting for the Prime Minister, who stood with them, took a lovely picture, and then he embarked on his journey towards Austria, leaving Moscow towards the airport. He should be reaching the airport and be off to Austria any moment now. It's a 45-minute drive to the airport for the Prime Minister. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we caught up with Abhay Singh, Russian parliamentarian who has his roots from Patna and Bihar. And then we also spoke to the Indian diaspora here, students, people residing here, business people, and from various communities and representing various groups here in Moscow. Nearly 1.5 lakh Indian population in Moscow city itself, or Moscow itself. Stay with us.
Vladimir Putin hosted Prime Minister Modi at his countryside residence in Moscow. Now, Prime Minister Modi and Putin were seen shaking hands as well. Today, the Prime Minister is going to meet the Indian diaspora, after which the first leg of his 3-day visit will come to an end, and the Prime Minister will then leave for Austria, which will also mark the first trip by any Indian Prime Minister to the country in last 41 years.
Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi, has arrived in Moscow for the 22nd annual summit. At the airport of arrival, he was received by First Deputy Prime Minister, His Excellency Denis Manturov. He was also given a ceremonial welcome and guard of honor. His Excellency First Deputy Prime Minister accompanied him to the hotel. At the hotel, Prime Minister was welcomed by a large gathering of Indian community members. Prime Minister has a packed schedule. He'll be attending the 22nd annual summit. He will have restricted and delegation level talks, and he will meet the Indian community. He will address the Indian community members and also visit Rosatom, an exhibition space.
And CNN News 18 Siddhant Mishra spoke with Ambassador of Austria to India, Katharina Wiese, on Prime Minister's Austria visit as well. Listen to what she has to say.
Ma'am, this is the first time after 40 years that Indian Prime Minister is visiting Austria, and we have been told that the core of this visit is going to be innovation, technology, business. Talk to us a little bit about it.
Yes, it is right. Prime Minister Modi is on his way to Austria. It's the first high-level visit at this level in more than 40 years, and we are very pleased and honored that it is taking place in this year when we are celebrating 75 years of bilateral relations between Austria and India. You are right, one important part.
Well, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has just finished the community address and the interaction with the Indian diaspora here. And joining me now is somebody who's got roots in Bharat, but he's plying his wares in Russia, and he's representing the people of Russia as an MP in the Russian Federation. And Abhay Singh ji, namaste. And I have to say, thank you very, very much for speaking with us. Your first thoughts on the Prime Minister's speech today?
Yeah, Prime Minister impressed everybody. Approximately 600 people were present now today. And a lot of Russians were there, a lot of Indians were there, but everybody was very impressed. So, and a lot of people got new information from Modi ji. And as I know before, Modi ji speaks very well. It was very fantastic.
पर एक बात बताइए, भारत रूस ये जो दोस्ती है, इसको कैसे बढ़ा सकते हैं? As an MP, I am asking you this from a Russian point of view.
देखिए, हमने 2 बार यहाँ का इलेक्शन, दूसरी बार अभी हमने जीता है. हमें रशियन लोग विश्वास करके मेरे ऊपर वोट देते हैं. सिर पे लाल टोपी रूसी, दिल है हिंदुस्तानी. सो हमारा जो दिल हिंदुस्तान का है वो कहीं नहीं जाने वाला है. आई विल वर्क फॉर गुड रिलेशन बिटवीन रशिया एंड इंडिया.
आप 2-time MP रहे हैं, so let me ask you this. व्हाट नीड्स टू बी डन? भारत और क्या कर सकता है? क्योंकि एक ट्रेड इम्बैलेंस अगर भारतीय पर्सपेक्टिव से देखें तो हम जितना रूस से एक्सपोर्ट करते हैं, इंपोर्ट करते हैं, उतना रूस को एक्सपोर्ट नहीं करते। अपॉर्चुनिटीज़ क्या हैं भारतवासियों के लिए इन रशिया? वेयर डू यू सी आर दी अपॉर्चुनिटीज़?
देखिए, अभी भी बहुत सारे फील्ड खाली हैं बिजनेस के लिए, और आप बिजनेस नहीं, कल्चर भी ले लीजिए। इंडियन फिल्म्स को और आना चाहिए यहाँ पे। जॉइंट फिल्म बनाइए, रशिया और इंडिया का फिल्म बनाइए। यहाँ पे इतने ज़्यादा फील्ड हैं जो अभी अनटच्ड हैं बिल्कुल। हमारे यहाँ इतने ज़्यादा मिनरल्स हैं। पेट्रोल की तो बात छोड़ दीजिए, पेट्रोल और गैस तो इंडिया लेता ही लेता है। अपनी ज़रूरत से 30% ज़्यादा इंडिया ले रहा है री एक्सपोर्ट करने के लिए। बहुत सारे फील्ड हैं। यू आर मोस्ट वेलकम। आइए रशिया, आइए, रशियन लोग को वहाँ बुलाइए, मिल के काम करिए।
लैंग्वेज का इशू है क्या सर? कितना टाइम लगता है रशियन सीखने में? कई लोग कहते हैं लैंग्वेज इज़ एन इशू, इसीलिए नहीं आ रहे हैं।
देखिए, हम 1991 में पढ़ने आए थे। उस समय इंग्लिश मीडियम तो था ही नहीं यहाँ पे। 6 महीने में हमने लैंग्वेज सीख ली थी। उसके बाद 6 महीने के बाद हमारे फिजिक्स, केमिस्ट्री, बायोलॉजी की पढ़ाई हुई। उसके बाद अगले साल हम लोग फर्स्ट ईयर में रशियन के बीच में हम लोग को बैठा दिया गया था। रशियन के साथ हम लोग क्लास करते थे। ऐसा भी कोई इतना डिफ़िकल्ट लैंग्वेज नहीं है, वेरी इजी। अगर आप में इच्छा है, आप कभी एकदम आराम से सीख जाएंगे।
एक मैं आपसे पूछना चाहूँगा, ऑस्ट्रेलिया जाते हैं, यूके जाते हैं, अमेरिका जाते हैं, रेसिज्म का एक इशू आता है कि जब बाहरी मूल के लोग आते हैं और रंग से या रंग भेद होता है या फिर देश की वजह से भेद होता है। रशिया में क्या भारतीयों के साथ ऐसा होता है?
नहीं, देखिए, रशिया और भारत की जो दोस्ती है पिछले 75 साल से इंक्रीज होती जा रही है। रशियन पूरे वर्ल्ड में अगर आपको कहीं पे दिल से कोई इज्जत करता है, वो इंडियंस की करता है। आप यहाँ आएंगे तो फील करेंगे। आप किसी लोकल आदमी से मिल कर देख लीजिए। तो हालांकि कुछ केसेस हैं, लेकिन वो रेयर केस है।
राष्ट्रपति पुतिन को लेकर पश्चिमी मीडिया का एक धारणा है, एक नैरेटिव बनाया गया है कि वो एक्सपेंशनिस्ट हैं, विस्तारवाद में विश्वास रखते हैं। यूक्रेन पर जो कॉन्फ्लिक्ट हुआ है, इसको लेकर के जगहसाई या किसी तरह से निंदा की जाती है और उन सैंक्शंस लगे हैं रूस पर। एज अ रशियन पार्लियामेंटेरियन आप क्या कहेंगे? व्हाट इज़ योर पर्सपेक्टिव?
देखिए, ऐसी कोई बात नहीं है, कोई विस्तारवादी। हमारे देश की धरती जो है दुनिया की सबसे बड़ी धरती है। हमें ज़मीन की कमी नहीं है। हमारा पॉपुलेशन रेशियो हमारे लैंड के हिसाब से बहुत कम है। देखिए, ये आप किसी वेस्ट कंट्री को ले लीजिए। आप एक दो कंट्री का हम आपको एग्जांपल देंगे। आप इंग्लैंड का ले लीजिए, आप डच का ले लीजिए, आप यूरोपियन किसी ऐसे कंट्री जो आपको तो पता ही होगा, वो लोग पूरे आधे धरती पे वो लोग राज करता था। एक्सपेंशन की नीति उनकी थी। वो लोग लूट के ले जाते थे, ह्यूमन रिसोर्सेज को भी लूट के ले जाते थे। सोना चांदी तो है ही है। अब लोग अभी के माहौल में रशिया ने कभी किया? पिछले 100 साल का इतिहास ले लीजिए, हिंदुस्तान में कभी ऐसा पॉलिसी नहीं रहा रशिया का। कभी वहाँ डच पहुँच रहे हैं, कभी जर्मन पहुँच रहे हैं, कभी पुर्तगाल पहुँच रहे हैं। इंग्लैंड वाले तो थे ही वहाँ पे। तो ये बिल्कुल गलत है और वर्ल्ड में ऐसा माहौल बनाया जा रहा है कि रशिया ऐसा कर रहा है।
पीएम मोदी और राष्ट्रपति पुतिन, इनकी जो ये मित्रता है, घनिष्ठता है, इसका सीक्रेट क्या है?
देखिए, मोदी जी और पुतिन साहब ये वर्ल्ड के टॉप लीडर्स हैं और जब तक दो लोगों का दिल नहीं मिलता है तब तक दोस्ती नहीं होती है। पुतिन साहब तो वर्ल्ड लीडर हैं। अगर पुतिन साहब देखते कि ये कनिंग है या कमज़ोर हैं या कुछ दूसरा है, इंडिया को झुकाया जा सकता है किसी की तरह से, तो उनकी दोस्ती कभी नहीं होती। दोनों बिल्कुल सिमिलर हैं, इसीलिए उनकी दोस्ती मेंटेन है।
मेरा अंतिम प्रश्न आपसे, भारत को मिस करते हैं, अपने गांव, अपने रूट्स को मिस करते हैं, कभी वापस जाते हैं, अभी भी संबंध बनाए हैं, या फिर अब रशिया में ही घर है, यहीं पे एक छोटा मिनी भारत भी है?
देखिए, हमारा तो अब तो हम रूस के लिए काम करते हैं, रशिया के लिए डिवोटेड हैं। हम अपने पब्लिक जो हमें विश्वास करके एक लोकल को वोट नहीं दिया, मेरे को वोट दिया, उसके लिए काम करते हैं। लेकिन हिंदुस्तान की याद हमेशा रहती है। अभी अगर मैं काम से हम फ्री हो जाए तो अभी आज के टिकट लेके हिंदुस्तान घूमने चले जाए, सब दोस्तों से मिलने के लिए।
तो अपने देश से, यानी कि अपने पुराने देश से, वतन से, जहाँ पे आप पैदा हुए और यहाँ आए, ये तो अब आपका वतन है, उनको आप क्या कहेंगे? रूस आए कि नहीं आए? यहाँ कारोबार बढ़ाएं कि नहीं बढ़ाएं? यहाँ पर दोस्ती बना के साथ साथ इकोनॉमिक पार्टनरशिप करें कि नहीं करें?
तो इसमें तो कोई दो मत है ही नहीं। वेलकम टू रशिया। आप रशिया आइए, हमारे रशियंस को भी आप इंडिया बुलाइए इन्वेस्ट इंडिया के थ्रू। अभी इन्वेस्ट इंडिया में रशियन लोग बहुत ज़्यादा इन्वेस्ट कर रहे हैं। आप भी आइए, हमारे यहाँ करिए। अगर कोई प्रॉब्लम है तो हम लोग हैं आपके लिए।
जी हाँ, हम तो ढूंढ लिए हैं अभय जी को, आप भी ढूंढिए, आप भी आइए, मिलिए उनसे यहाँ मॉस्को में। बहुत बहुत आभार, धन्यवाद, थैंक यू सो मच, प्लेजर स्पीकिंग विद यू सर। I got some students here. See, we've spoken to a lot of people. अलग-अलग लोगों से हम बात कर रहे हैं. We've got some students who are studying in Moscow. चलिए उनसे बात करते हैं. Let's try and understand who they are. Hi, join in. नमस्ते, आप लोग सब कहाँ से? Are you all studying here?
Yeah, we are studying here.
You're studying here?
No, I'm a resident cardiovascular surgeon.
Oh, you're a resident cardiovascular surgeon. We've got residents here. You're also a student?
Yes, private.
जी बिल्कुल यहाँ
Student, same.
Ma'am, you live here?
Yes,
You live here. And what about you?
I live here.
You live here.
Yeah, I am a student.
You're a student. So we've got a student, we've got a cardiovascular surgeon, we've got residents here. So let's talk to all of them. सबसे बात करते हैं. सबसे पहले तो एक बात बताइए, हेल्थ केयर का यहाँ कितना पोटेंशियल है?
हेल्थ केयर का पोटेंशियल काफ़ी अच्छा है। और मैं आपको बता दूं, मैं जब सर्जरीज करता हूँ, जो भी हम नीडल्स यूज़ करते हैं, नीडल होल्डर्स यूज़ करते हैं, ऑल ऑफ देम कम फ्रॉम वापी, गुजरात। एंड दैट्स अ प्राउड मोमेंट। आई ऑलवेज टेल माई टीम, all of this has come from India. Also the prosthesis that we use, it's coming from India. So Russia, India in healthcare is like a major goal, and we need to rediscover this and make it big together.
Big together. Yes. Doctors यहाँ पर डिमांड है?
Absolutely.
मेडिकल प्रोफेशन में डिमांड है?
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल डिमांड है, स्पेशली सर्जन्स की, कार्डियो सर्जन्स की, न्यूरो सर्जन्स की, एंड द रिस्पेक्ट दैट दे हैव फॉर इंडियन पीपल, क्योंकि हाउ वी ट्रीट आवर पेशेंट्स, जैसे पीएम सर आल्सो मेंशन टुडे, तो सब लोग बहुत प्यार करते हैं इंडिया को।
पैसे अच्छे देते हैं?
पैसे काफ़ी अच्छे हैं गाइस।
और रशियन सीखने में तकलीफ तो नहीं होती?
नहीं, एवरीथिंग इज फाइन।
कितना टाइम लगा सीखने में?
2 साल।
2 साल लग गए यार, कुछ कह रहे हैं 6 महीने में, आपको 2 साल लगे। लेकिन सर्जन
मेडिकल लैंग्वेज है ना, तो सिर्फ कम्युनिकेशन के लिए नहीं, बट मेडिकल लैंग्वेज ऑल्सो।
लैंग्वेज के लिए। लवली। आप लोग क्या पढ़ रहे हैं? व्हाट आर यू स्टडीइंग?
मैं रशियन लैंग्वेज में पीएचडी कर रहा हूँ। मैं फाइनल ईयर में पीएचडी में हूँ, और मैं यहाँ पे रशियन स्कॉलरशिप जो गवर्नमेंट देती है, मैं उस पर आया था, और इसी की देन है कि हम यहाँ पे अभी एक साथ इकट्ठा हुए हैं।
आप रशियन भी बोलते हैं और हिंदी भी बोलते हैं?
जी, दोनों।
अरे वाह, तो आपको देख के ऐसा नहीं लगता कि आप रशियन बोलते हैं?
Не знаю, я говорю по-русски.
Я тоже говорю, я люблю Индию, мой Индия это мой горжусь.
ट्रांसलेट करिए। नहीं, तुम ट्रांसलेट करो। टेस्ट तो करें।
किस चीज़ को ट्रांसलेट करना, आप ये बताएं। इन्होंने बोला कि ये हिंदुस्तान से बहुत प्यार करते हैं और रशिया से बहुत प्यार करते हैं।
इंडिया इज माय प्राइड एज वेल।
अभी पीएचडी में थोड़ा मेहनत करने पड़ेगा। तो अच्छा, आप क्या कर रहे हैं?
आई एम डूइंग प्राइवेट इंटरनेशनल लॉ। आई एम अ लॉयर।
आप लॉयर हैं? So you're a lawyer and you're practicing here?
Yes, but after I came here and I'm doing private international law.
International law. तो वहाँ पे इंडियन लॉ सीखने के बाद यहाँ इंटरनेशनल लॉ?
Yes, इंटरनेशनल लॉ में हमारे कन्वेंशन, ट्रीटीज और ये होता है, एंड स्टेट लॉज के जो भी होते हैं ये सब।
स्टूडेंट्स यहाँ पे अच्छे हैं?
बिल्कुल people are good.
रैगिंग हुई कि नहीं?
No way, it is not possible.
दोस्त बनाए यहाँ पर?
बहुत सारे।
Did you feel at home when you came in here?
At first no, but now yes, like we are already acquainted with the.
So students, whoever wants to study abroad, should they look at Russia as an option?
Of course, it's the best option, I guess.
आप कब से हैं यहाँ पर?
जी, मैं अभी 4 साल से हूँ यहाँ पर।
4 साल से? आपने रशियन सीख ली?
नहीं, थोड़ी बहुत।
But how easy or difficult is it?
नहीं, इजी है। अगर आप बोलते हुए जाएंगे तो सीख जाएंगे, वरना तो हार्ड लगेगी।
But for your family, children, have they adjusted here?
Yes, of course.
Is she related to you?
Yes, she is my like a sister only.
Okay, so how about you? आप यहाँ कितने साल से?
मैं यहाँ पे पिछले 18 साल से हूँ।
18 साल से हैं, तो आप हिंदी भी बोलती हैं, रशियन भी बोलती हैं?
हाँ, और मैं यहाँ पे मैंने अपनी स्कूलिंग भी मॉस्को से ही की है। यहाँ पे एक स्कूल है जो एम्बेसी के थ्रू हमें प्रोवाइड किया गया है, एम्बेसी ऑफ इंडिया स्कूल मॉस्को। वो बहुत ही अच्छा स्कूल है, गवर्नमेंट स्कूल है, स्पेशली सीबीएसई बोर्ड है, तो वो हमारे लिए बहुत सारी फैसिलिटीज़ उन्होंने ये चीज़ दी है, तो हमारे लिए बहुत फ़ायदा है।
18 साल में इतनी अच्छी हिंदी रशिया में रह करके बोल रही हैं, बहुत ही अच्छा लग रहा है।
हाँ।
2 साल से यहाँ ये रशियन बोलना सीख गए, आप 18 साल में हिंदी बोलना सीख गई। वेरी गुड। व्हाट अबाउट यू?
नमस्कार।
नमस्ते।
मेरा नाम दीपक है और मैं यहाँ रशिया से पीएचडी कर रहा हूँ रशियन लैंग्वेज में।
अपने बिहारी दोस्तों को पूछेंगे नहीं बिहार में कावा?
कैसे बड़े हाल चाल बिहार का?
कैसन बड़े हाल बचा। पर आप बताइए, जितने आपके दोस्त हैं जो वहाँ पे स्टूडेंट्स हैं, क्या उनको यहाँ ऑप्शन देखना चाहिए पढ़ने का?
एक्चुअली यस,
क्यों?
यहाँ देखनी चाहिए क्योंकि यहाँ हम लोग जो फर्स्ट टाइम आए थे, एक्चुअली मेरी ग्रेजुएशन हुई थी JNU से। तो JNU के बाद अपन लोग स्कॉलरशिप करके उसके बाद यहाँ रशिया है।
क्या पढ़ रहे हैं आप?
रशियन लैंग्वेज।
रशियन लैंग्वेज। तो आप सब फिलोलॉजिस्ट हैं?
या एक्चुअली वी आर फ्रॉम सेम।
अच्छा, सेम JNU। अच्छा, ग्रुप से आए हैं। अच्छा,
एग्जैक्टली। तो उन्हीं मुझे लगता है कि यहाँ देखनी चाहिए चांसेस, क्योंकि अब आप जैसा जानते हैं कि रशिया इंडिया के रिलेशन भी अच्छे सुधर रहे हैं। तो आई होप इंडिया में बेहतर अपॉर्चुनिटी होगी रशियन लैंग्वेज से काम के लिए और फिर इंटरप्रिटेशन के लिए।
आप एक काम कीजिए, कुछ रशियंस को हिंदी भी सिखा दीजिए, तो जब वो वहाँ आएंगे तो उनको तकलीफ नहीं होगी। हाय, व्हाट्स योर नेम?
डॉक्टर अशोक पटेल।
आप भी डॉक्टर?
हाँ जी।
गुजरात से आए आप?
यस सर।
या आप क्या कर रहे हैं?
2008 से मैं रशिया में हूँ सर।
और क्या प्रैक्टिस करते हैं?
मैं अभी MBBS मेरा कंप्लीट हुआ, PG भी मैंने रशिया से की। अभी ऑरेनबर्ग स्टेट मेडिकल यूनिवर्सिटी में 1800 प्लस इंडियन स्टूडेंट्स हैं। वो सारे स्टूडेंट्स का मैं रिप्रेजेंटेटिव हूँ।
सारे स्टूडेंट्स के रिप्रेजेंटेटिव्स हैं। सो शुड दे लुक एट रशिया टू स्टडी मेडिसिन और प्रैक्टिस?
रशिया मेडिसिन की स्टडी में दी बेस्ट है सर, क्योंकि यहाँ पे थियरी से ज़्यादा प्रैक्टिकल पे फोकस किया जाता है। दूसरा, यहाँ से पढ़ने के बाद इंडिया में जाके हमें FMG फॉरेन मेडिकल ग्रेजुएट एग्जामिनेशन लाइसेंसिंग एग्जामिन है, स्क्रीनिंग टेस्ट पास करना होता है, जिसका सबसे ज़्यादा पासिंग रेशियो रशिया का है। पहले स्टूडेंट्स यूक्रेन में जाते थे, चाइना में जाते थे। अभी वहाँ पे करंट सिचुएशन के हिसाब से अभी रशिया में स्टूडेंट्स का आना बढ़ा है। अभी इतनी डिमांड है रशिया में स्टूडेंट्स की कि अभी से एडमिशन क्लोज हो रहे हैं कुछ यूनिवर्सिटी में। स्टूडेंट्स इतने सारे।
Is the strengthening of our economic partnership and technology and innovation. Cooperation in the startup sector has been an important focus of our business cooperation over the past 2 years. There have been, I think, 5 startup missions both ways in the past years. And during the visit of the Austrian Minister of Labour and Economy, Minister Kocher, to India in February, a bilateral startup bridge was launched between India and Austria. I think it's India's 21st startup bridge. And it has already brought more cooperation in that sector, as you mentioned.
And some big developments now coming in at the top of the segment. As per the government sources, Russia has decided to discharge and in fact facilitate return of all the Indians working in the Russian army after the Prime Minister takes up the matter with the President Putin. This is very big development as 4 Indians have already been killed in the war. 10 have returned, but nearly 35 to 40 Indians are still believed to be stuck in Russia. Remember, India has been pressing very hard for return of all the Indians fighting in the Russian army as well, and it can be seen as a diplomatic victory for India. We have CNN News 18's Aman Sharma and Payal Mehta joining us on the broadcast. A very good morning to both of you. Aman, first coming to you, what kind of messaging can be decoded with the strategic partnership that India is trying to hold with Russia under Modi 3.0?
See, this is a very big development. Russia has decided to discharge and facilitate the return of all Indians which are fighting for the Russian army currently in Ukraine. This is a major breakthrough achieved during Prime Minister Narendra Modi's ongoing visit to Moscow. The development has come after Mr. Modi took up the matter with Russian President Vladimir Putin during their private dinner on Monday. This is what sources are telling us. And, the plight of the Indians fighting for Russia and the Ukraine war has been a key concern for New Delhi. In recent months, reports had surfaced about Indians who had fallen prey to job frauds, were tricked and forced by scammers to fight for the Russian army, which allows recruits from other countries. So far, 4 Indians have been killed in the Russian-Ukraine war. 10 of them have returned to the country, but about 35 to 40 Indians are still believed to be stuck in Russia. And this is why the India's foreign ministry has earlier said that it has been pressing very hard to bring back these recruits. And in fact, Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar had said that the issue is of very deep concern for India. They had been engaging with Russia for the past few months for a headway, because the recruitment of Indian nationals in the Russian army is in a conflict situation, is not in consonance with the India-Russia diplomatic partnership. That is what Indian Foreign Ministry has been maintaining. So this breakthrough now coming during Prime Minister Modi's visit to Russia will be seen as a major diplomatic breakthrough.
Right, Aman, please stay with us. Payal also continues to stay with us on the broadcast. Payal, why exactly having a very strong bond and a bonhomie with Russia at this point of time so important for India, also considering a couple of, strained border relations with rest of the countries?
Well, of course, India's visit to Russia is being keenly observed by many, including China and US, among the others as well. Remember, it was Prime Minister Narendra Modi who used his diplomatic excellencies and used his diplomatic connections whatsoever that he had when he was safely able to evacuate.
This is CNN News 18 and Federal Bank Primetime Studio.
Good evening, this is Brass Tacks. I'm Dacha Jacob. We're coming to you live from the CNN News 18 and Federal Bank Primetime Studio. Prime Minister Modi has concluded his two-day visit to Russia. India and Russia have clinched a number of deals from defense to energy cooperation to infrastructure. Prime Minister Modi has also been conferred with the highest civilian honor by the government of Russia. But it also happened to be on the same day as one of the biggest children's hospitals in Ukraine was attacked. Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, tweeted saying that it was sad to see the leader of the world's largest democracy hugging the world's most bloody criminal, in reference to Putin. Congress's Jairam Ramesh has echoed that, saying that the Vishwaguru turned Vishwabandhu must answer about all that boast about war rukwadi. Now, while the timing of the visit by the Prime Minister and the attack on the children's hospital by Russian forces may be a mere coincidence, how does India walk this diplomatic tightrope?